gentlemen, thanks for coming to the American Security Project. I'm Steve Cheney, I'm the Chief Executive Officer. And let me lay out some ground rules right up front, and then I'll talk a little bit about ASP and why we're here today. I'll introduce our speakers. We'll start with General Kearney and then Admiral Fallon. We'll follow up with a Q&A session. During the Q&A, we don't have a roving mic, so when I pick on somebody to ask a question, if you please stand up, state your name and affiliation, and speak loudly and shortly. We'll have a pretty good proceeding, I think, here today. This forum is on the record, and we are taping it, and we'll have it up on our website this afternoon. Our hashtag is over here if you're so interested. American Security Project was founded in 2006 by Senators Hagel, Kerry, Rudman, and Hart, and the intent was to take topical issues and discuss them in a nonpartisan way with a national security bent to them, and I'm sure a couple of those names are pretty familiar to you given what's happened in the last couple of weeks. We're rather excited to have the Senator Kerry nominated for Sec State and Senator Hagel for Sec Def. Apprehensive because I'm sure both will depart our board, but I think it's indicative of the quality of the board that we've got at American Security Project. We are a small, lean organization, but we take these topics and expose them to the public and hopefully educate you, the Hill, the Pentagon, the general public on what's important to our national security in relation to these subjects. And that's why we're here today. We're going to talk about Iran and the costs and benefits of military options associated with Iran. Now, a report was put out in September of this past year by the Iran Project, and I'm sure some of you might be familiar. It was called Weighing Benefits of Costs and Benefits of Military Action Against Iran. Then they subsequently came out with another report in December on international sanctions on Iran. Now, we can talk about either one, although I'm not the sanctions experts, nor are the two gentlemen to my right. Our expertise is on the military side of the house, but all three of us signed up to that initial report on military options in Iran. Now, these are obviously very interesting times, and this subject has died down over the last couple of months, but some interesting developments yesterday and today. IAEA inspectors left yesterday and arrived in Tehran today. And there's been an announcement that there will be talks now on the 28th and 29th of January. So these are two pretty, in my opinion, significant accomplishments that heretofore had not occurred in the last 6 months. We all know our election's over, Russia's election's over, Israel's election coming up next week, and of course they have an election in Iran in June. So a lot of this is getting pushed back, and now we're finally getting some progress made on Iran. But today, our focus wants to be cost and consequences of military action against Iran. You've read the biographies, I'm sure, and you know these two gentlemen to my right, but let me point out some things that perhaps are not obvious. General Kearney is a combat veteran of Grenada, Panama, Bosnia, Iraq, and Afghanistan. Pretty amazing, and he's had a fabulous career. Admiral Fallon is a combat veteran of Vietnam, Bosnia, Iraq, and Afghanistan. And we got nice representation here. We got the Army on one side, Navy, and I'm here to take care of the Marines. Admiral Fallon retired as a 4-star admiral. He spent 8 years as a 4-star admiral, culminating as combatant commander for first the Pacific Command and later as Central Command. And Admiral, 41 years of service to our country, to which we thank you. And General Kearney, 35 years, we thank you as well. An attack on Iran won't be like anything that Israel did to either Syria or Iraq. It won't be like Osiris, nor will it be like Al-Kibar in 2007. It's not going to be a pinprick type operation. And if you look at the report, a lot of this is discussed in some detail. I'm sure everybody here is familiar. Iran's got multiple processing facilities and enrichment facilities, at least 6, not the least of which is Fordow, which is buried some 300 feet down. Also, they have a considerable air defense capability. So when you talk about a military option, this is going to be something much, much, much bigger. Obviously, all of us prefer a political solution to this problem. But there is a military option. And when you look at the signatories to our paper, which include, by the way, Senator Hagel, and I continue Senator Kerry feels the same way, we want to use the military option as the last option, but we want to discuss what the ramifications would be of a military option in association with Iran, and they're significant. And it's important that you understand it and that we understand it, we recognize that it's there. I think Senator Hagel's made it clear, he certainly did with his interview with Senator Schumer the other day. If we need a military option and if we have to do it, we will do it. We will not allow Iran to possess a nuclear weapon, and I think that's clear. So with that, I think I've laid the groundwork, and General Kearney, I'll turn it over to you.
Hey, thanks, Steve. First, thanks for the opportunity to be here. It's important that we had this discussion, a public forum. I think it's probably not been as public as it ought to be, and probably has not been as forthcoming in the minds of what's been going on in a political campaign, and clearly is competing with Lance Armstrong and other important priorities globally for time to discuss what's important in life. I think the Iran project's purpose was exactly to have forums like this to get folks out on public media with a great document that kind of lays out the objectives, the costs, and the benefits of potential military action and the attendant risks. As a soldier who served a number of tours in combat with a son who remains serving in combat, it's of great interest to me personally, as well as for the soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines I have served who will be doing this over time. The policy of the United States is pretty clear, though often argued, as people try to refine the policy and put a red line in there or a trigger for when are we going to take some action, what are we going to do beyond what we're doing with the sanctions regime, with diplomatic talks, in what would trigger military action. Again, this administration is reasonably clear that they do not want the Iranian government and the Iranian people to have a nuclear weapon. There clearly is a timeline associated with that. We argue about the fidelity of that timeline. How long will it take to complete enrichment to 90%? How long will it take to weaponize that capability? Do they have the right missile technology and quality of missiles to deliver a product to make this a weaponized effort? In the other piece of this on the sliding scale is that Israel and the United States have two different capabilities, and that one nation who is very, very close to the problem and sees it as an existential threat has a capability that has a timeline that begins to shrink as you look at enrichment being complete to certain levels and then move to a hardened storage facility, that their ability to interdict, damage, or degrade is far less than that of the United States. And as a result, the United States has a much longer window, has far greater capability, and probably can do a more sustained effort to get at that. But it comes to the crux of international relationships, which is all about trust. And so those were the big issues that I kind of peeled out of this report, and one of the reasons that I'm into it. When you look at how do we need to define this as a military professional, the real question that I would always ask political leadership is, what are your objectives? What is it you would like me to accomplish as a military player in this? And then what are the policy objectives that we should be striving for? Is it in fact to destroy capabilities, and do we have the capability to do that right now? I think there's great debate on how much damage we can do at Fordow, how much time we would have that the Iranians would be able to move materials around, and what the effects are. And so we have a window of how long we think we can degrade that process. Is there a hidden agenda in there where it is really an objective to degrade the military capability of the state of Iran so that they're less of a regional hegemon, so that they're played better with their neighbors? Will it adjust the balance of power in the region? Is that something that we want to accomplish, or is that just collateral damage in attacking the nuclear targets that are there? Ultimately, people talk about changing the behavior of the Iranian state, which means changing the behavior of the Iranian regime. You can't kill knowledge, and therefore the knowledge will exist post-strike, post-military action, and unless the nation state and its leaders decide they don't want to pursue a military or a weaponization and a nuclear option, that potential still exists. So you have the risk out there that military power may not achieve whatever those three objectives are, whether it's just the degrade and delay so we can continue to have dialogue. But what is clear is that without military power as a lever, and without it as a credible threat, that we probably can't move a regime that is completely against the West, that it's part of their culture to be anti-West, to take pressure from the West and actually yield and make decisions is very, very difficult for them. So you have to have a lever, you have to have a threat, you have to have something that causes pressure. What can we hope to achieve? What are the benefits? I mean, clearly the benefits are destruction of some of the capability. Delay for this paper articulates 2 to 4 years, but certainly there's arguments on the higher end of that it could last longer. I'm not quite sure we know how fast and how determined the Iranian regime would be to rebuild, or if they should they choose to do so. We take a look at a unilateral Israeli response and say it could be up to 2 years that we could delay the program given their capability and what they could do. We certainly would see that as a deterrent to others who would have a problem. It certainly aligns our actions with our words, which is good for U.S. credibility with our neighbors and our partners and our allies. And frankly, it tells folks out there that if you want to be in the nuclear business, you need to follow the regimes that are laid out by the United States, the United Nations, I'm sorry, and the IAEA to be able to do things. Military operations are always fraught with risk. You never know quite what will happen when you open Pandora's box and take action. Clearly, the biggest threat is an economic threat. As we threaten the oil routes for 20% of the world's oil as they move through the straits, of course, that has a adverse effect on the Iranian economy as well, and so it's not in their self-interest to keep those closed for a very long time. Merely threatening action will do that. It will watch the price of oil move up, but some of those economic threats are also benefits in that they will bring, hopefully, some unlikely players at this point in time to the table diplomatically to apply pressure as well. So the efforts are not just military, the efforts are military, economic, all to drive people to come to the bargaining table and talk. Of course, we stand to lose credibility if we have to strike preemptively and it's not abundantly clear that the Iranians have a nuclear capability. We certainly have baggage from our Iraqi decisions as we move forward, and it would erode our position in the world if we can't prove after the fact that what we have stated is unequivocally clear as we move forward. We risk breaking down the sanctions regime that has existed, the alliance we've kind of put together to put pressure on them as we move forward. So when you look at this, it's a good public debate. We've got objectives that we have articulated. We have some that may be behind the scenes, or we could be on a slippery slope away from just delaying and degrading their nuclear facilities. But all that fraught with risk as we move forward. And so we think that military power is always a last resort, but it has to be on the table. And I think that's what's articulated clearly in this document. I'll go ahead and finish my comments with that.
General, thank you. Admiral Fallon, I know you've had extensive experience in the area, starting with Central Command, and I know you have strong opinions about Iran and military options, so we welcome your remarks.
Well, thanks, Steve. A pleasure to be back and to be able to join Frank, my old neighbor from CENTCOM, a man who has a lot of hands-on experience in the region, and we share something else in common, too. We have mountain hideouts out in Montana. It's a long way from Washington. Politics are a little different out there, and very quite different than this climate in a lot of ways. I would put in a short pitch for ASP. I'm really pleased to be a member of the board here. It's a rare organization in this city that really strives as a matter of foremost principle to try to be nonpartisan, to take all opinions and to work with them to try to reach consensus on key issues that we face. And there's a long list of them here. You see some of the propaganda and things around on the bulkheads and in the handouts. It's a really good cause, and there are unfortunately not enough folks that I see in the city that are committed to the kinds of cooperative mental activities that this group advocates. So pleased to be a piece of that. I guess to get into this subject a little bit, it might be worthwhile to at least I'll give you my view of some background here and why this is a continuing problem, this being the relationship between the U.S. and Iran, and certainly by extension the nuclear issues that are related. So we have 30-some years of tension, to put it mildly, friction, outright hostility, certainly a trust deficit with a capital D. We've had a very, very tough relationship with this government of Iran after the revolution in '79. For better or for worse, I've been tied up in this region ever since then. I was out there from early 1980, and since then I've been back and forth many times. So I've got a chance to know some of the players, certainly to have what I think is a pretty good understanding of what goes on in the background. It's complex, but the fundamentals are really boiled down to a few key facts. We have virtually no relationship between the two governments. That's on the official side. Very interestingly, there's a tremendous amount of personal relationship between individuals, Iranian and American, who not only go back and forth pretty regularly, but a lot of family ties that are pretty deeply rooted in both countries. So we have several levels of activity that go on. And of course, there are advocates at every level for actions here, there, and everywhere. Frank alluded to the reality of kind of one of the pillars of the foundation, if you would, of the regime in Tehran is a very, very strident anti-Americanism. And there's a long history in it, and I'm sure some are very, very familiar with it. I'm not going to recite the thing chapter and verse, except to say that certainly in the spoken and written words of the leadership in Tehran, the U.S. is at fault for numerous things that extend way beyond the revolution of '79. And the basic issue is the U.S. is a great big meddler and basically have come into this region, the Gulf area, and they shouldn't be playing the role. And what's unspoken there is that the Iranian view of things is that they're the locals, they've been around for thousands of years, and they deserve to play a major role in the region, and that's clearly an objective. Many things have happened over the years to raise the levels of antagonism, and so we're left with where we are. I can't do too much about the past, none of us can, but it seems to me that what we have to do is deal with the present and look to the future. And the future would be bleak indeed if in fact we end up with nuclear weapons proliferating in this region. If you were to tie that with some of the stated objectives of the government in Tehran, it's no surprise that it gets people in this country, and particularly in Israel, pretty uptight when we listen to some of the rhetoric that emanates from Tehran. So with that as background, we have the other activity that, from our view in the U.S., that I'll align myself with not only this administration, but the previous administration and several before that, in a bit of puzzlement over observed Iranian activities in the nuclear area compared to their rhetoric. And so if you would believe even the most recent comments in the last couple of days, there's no intention whatsoever, says the leadership in Tehran, to pursue nuclear weapons. In fact, we have a fatwa, and the supreme ruler has issued this, and of course, he would never go back on his word, and so not us. But some of the facts around belie those statements. The secret activities that have been discovered on several occasions by UN inspectors after the fact, where the Iranians not even sheepishly, grudgingly admitted, okay, well, you caught us, so we'll tell you something about this on a couple of occasions. We have a very, very aggressive program to enrich uranium that by, it seems to me, most reasonable views far exceeds any peaceful requirement that anybody could conjure up. So this has created an atmosphere of distrust, of concern, and the potential, if you add the rhetoric that's come out of Tehran, to obliterate Israel and several other similar phrases, and to can get people to be very, very concerned. And so what do people do when they get concerned? They look for solutions, and a handy one, at least in terms of talk, has been, well, let's go whack these guys. We've got a strong military here, and why don't we just put it to use and take care of this problem militarily? Were it so simple. Frank has already mentioned the reality that, and Steve as well, that there are some precedents for dealing with budding nuclear weapons programs, both in Iraq and in Syria. But this is a little different because it is not a pinpoint target. There's not one place, there's not one strike that can take care of this problem. And what we have endeavored to do in this document that put out a couple of months ago was to invite people to, in keeping with the principles of ASP, although it didn't come from ASP, to sit back for a minute and just contemplate some of the facts here and some of the realities that would be involved if one were to decide to, quote, use the military option or pursue that military option. And probably from a long practitioner of that particular brand of national power, the biggest comment that I would make is that it is unlikely to be easily done, when I say easily, in a very short period of time with a minimum amount of force. It's probably going to be a very detailed undertaking, and the Iranians are working overtime, in my opinion, to make sure that that's the case. So I don't know what their real intentions are, and if anybody has any insight there, please speak up and educate us all. We can only judge by behaviors, it seems, and behaviors have been unsettling. Very interesting of late, hasn't it, though? It's gotten kind of quiet. If you were to look at the history of the last 30 or so years of U.S.-Iranian engagement or lack thereof, it seems to me you see these episodic periods where things really kind of go dormant for a while, and you're left to wonder what's going on, what's happening in the background. People might have an opinion. Happy to hear those today. But activities that have been ongoing, the sanctions have been brought up already. In my opinion, there's not a great history of success in sanctions in many places. However, this is something that's been going on for a long time, and they hurt. There's no doubt about it. To what extent they hurt, to what extent the recipients of these sanctions can overcome or try to mitigate, they aren't going to overcome them, but try to mitigate, varies. There's lots of history out there for this. There's little doubt in my mind that they're hurting. I advocated some time ago that if we really wanted to get serious in trying to get the attention of the regime, that the pocketbook was probably a really good place to start. And when I was out in CENTCOM, I watched with interest the activities in Dubai, which seem to be the central bank for most Iranian financial things. So that's a little different now. There is a pretty good bite in the wallet, and I think that's having some effect. But there are all these other